Well, what we need is like a weight on the sole or some type of dial, and you just turn it for how many more yards you want. So if you build that in, turn it up to 11, maybe that's as high as it goes. I don't know.
Just let your fitter turn a bunch of dials for you and find out what that distance equals.
Hey everybody, how you living? No Putts Given, Tony and Chris, we're back, and we have guests. We have Justin Thomas with us today in
the back there,
form, in the background, absolutely. But more importantly, who do we have with us today, Tony?
Why don't we let them introduce themselves? How about that? So we don't screw it up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Luttrell. I'm the Director of Metalwood Development for Titleist Golf Clubs.
And I'm JJ VanWezenbeeck, Director of Player Promotions on the PGA Tour.
What does that actually mean? What do you do?
Yeah, so I oversee kind of our tour teams, fitting professional golfers kind of around the world, and then try to liaison that information back to Stephanie and her team on what players are looking for.
So
you're basically the one who creates problems for.
Yes.
Chief problem creator. How did you guys, just respectfully, how did you get into golf? What's a little bit of your kind of background and story? You don't necessarily wake up one day and be like, hey, I want to be Director of Metalwoods at Titleist, and here we go. So how did you get from where you were to kind of where you are today?
Well, I come from a family of golfers, and I had played golf throughout high school and was fortunate enough to get to play golf at the collegiate level at the University of Michigan, and studied mechanical engineering there, fell in love with the game of golf, and said, how do I bring these two things together? And so as an oddly focused 18-year-old, you could say I went and pursued this path and have been fortunate enough now to work in the golf industry and golf product development and research for 20 years.
So Ann Arbor, you went to...
Yes, go blue.
So my hometown team, my CSU Rams, right, are on the road playing at the Big House this weekend, and they're currently 30.5 point underdogs. Do you feel like that's a fair line, Steph? Is that something you would wager on?
Well, I'm not a wagering person, but I feel pretty confident that my Wolverines have it down this weekend.
We'll see. It could be an upset of epic proportions. So
it could. It's happened before.
I don't like my chances either. But JJ, how about you? How'd you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I actually grew up about 2 blocks from a former PGA Tour stop. So I was kind of exposed to professional golf at a young age. I went to the PGM program at Penn State and was working at a country club, and kind of fell into a really good situation where I had a member who was consulting for some fitting outfits and got the chance to use one of the first TrackMans, one of the first flight scopes, and help vet out some radar fitting, and was able to meet some folks that worked for Acushnet at the time and moved to California and kind of embraced that fitting aspect, and working with Stephanie and the other R&D team to just go, hey, we can take all this stuff even a little bit farther in terms of fitting and product at the highest levels.
And how long have you both been with Acushnet / Titleist in your respective positions?
Has it been around the same amount of time? I've been with the Acushnet Titleist for 15 years.
Yeah, and I'm coming up on 17 years with Acushnet and 5 years in my current role.
And we have the Big Ten covered. So we got Penn State. We got the big.
Lots of Midwest people find their way out to California. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Right, before we talk about TSR, I know you're excited both to talk about it. I got to ask, what golf ball do you each play?
I play Pro V1X. Need all the launch.
I'm in the same spot. I'm a little lower launch, lower spin, so I'm Pro V1X.
2021, JJ. I know you like to dig deep into the archives.
Yeah, I love the new aerodynamic package on the 21 golf ball. Little coastal breeze. It's really good. So I'm 21X.
How about that?
How about that? What are the chances?
I'm shocked. I thought it was going to be like 2015 off book.
2013, the original left dot formulation, maybe. Right. Right. Well, let's dive into TSR stuff a little bit, because I know that we're excited on our end, having had a chance to hit it, see it, learn more about it, but thought this might be kind of a fun time to dig into some of the background design process, and then a lot on the fitting side as well, JJ. But coming from TS to TSI and now into TSR, what were you hearing from the tour players in terms of, what did they really want out of a driver next iteration? And, how consistent were those messages from those guys and gals out on tour?
Yeah, I think the first thing that's always asked for is faster. It's normally, just like a consumer, it's the top of every tour player's list. So as we moved from 917 to TS to TSI and now TSR, that was always kind of at the forefront. The surprising one for us is we just had our 4th consecutive season on the PGA Tour of being the #1 driver on tour, which I don't think a lot of people are recognizing. So this momentum's been building and sustaining on the PGA Tour level. So we work really hard with Stephanie's team on shaping and sound, but a lot of the performance variables are similar to what just anyone would want in terms of launch, spin, and speed.
So Steph, you have JJ in yours, but you're also getting feedback, I assume, from your sales team, from fitters, and probably from your marketing guys as well, with certain requirements for the retail challenges and things like that. So do you ever run into conflicts there, like between what JJ is telling you tour wants and what the broader market wants? And how do you manage that when there are sort of differences?
I think for the most part, there's pretty good alignment with regards to drivers specifically. So when we talk through drivers, we have 4 distinct models. And so we're always looking at how do we optimize the performance of each of those models for the target player, with the 3 being that player that's a little more precise, the 2 being the all-around forgiveness, and the 4 being that ultra-low spin player. So there's good coverage there, I think, with regards to what tour needs are and what all golfers need, and the feedback that we get from our fitters and sales and marketing teams. Where we've diverged at points in time have actually been with more of the fairway woods and the hybrids and the gapping clubs, because tour players are already very well optimized in terms of their launch conditions. They're not necessarily looking for those clubs to go further. They want to hit a specific number. So that's where you see some disparate thoughts with regards to what general golfing population needs versus sometimes what the tour needs. But we do a good job of balancing that in terms of through build specifications and the way that JJ and his team fit fairways and hybrids to make sure that what we're making for everyone is also what's very much so used on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, I think we at Titleist end up in a very unique spot. We always take the Bob Vokey line of, we actually have the best R&D research team in Tour Pros to provide feedback. And so, the sound and the feel that a Justin Thomas is going to like normally resonates with a really good player. So, being in that, avid golfer space, there is a lot of overlap in what that look a player is looking for in terms of face angle, shape, what that sound region is. So we end up seeing that. So in the room, there isn't normally that big a divergence. And then with flexibility of weight, adjustability, and sure fit hosel, we can get to a lot of the places. It's a little bit, I think, why you see our SKU mix being bigger than some companies, having 3 fairway woods, having 4 drivers, having 13, 15, 16, 5, 18 in multiple models, kind of gives us a lot of overlap to help the market, but also help the tour player.
And right and left-handed this time around, right? Where if it's available righty, it's going to be available lefty. And this leads me to a different question too. It's like, design isn't a linear process, right? Like, you don't start here, end up here, and everything was just perfectly smooth, right? And there's a gentleman, and we won't say his name. We won't speak of.
We are forbidden.
To acknowledge, but part of his job, right, is to give you indications, feedback, maybe when things don't work exactly as they should. With TSR, what were some of the major hurdles that you had to overcome? And, were there any kind of major problems that were, like this was a huge, breakthrough to get from step 5 to step 6? That was the biggest jump. Like, where did you hit those roadblocks and how'd you overcome them?
I think, we're constantly trying to push the limits. And with TSI, we had introduced a new face insert material with ATI 425 that's incredibly high strength and high flexibility too. And it almost was a solution to a problem for us at the time. We had a really aggressive face insert design, but it didn't necessarily meet our durability and lifetime use criteria. Well, our engineers, we've had 2 more years to kind of advance and look at that material and how do we apply it? How do we leverage it to make even better face insert designs? And so our first foray really pushes the limit too far. And so that's always the case. We're always trying to figure out where is the limit of the performance of the material and how do we bring as much performance and speed to the player that we can. So that was one element. Another element that's iterative in nature is the aerodynamic improvements that we've made to the TSR series. So with the drivers specifically, we have an aerodynamicist on staff in our research and development team that has allowed us to look at refinements and shape. So you take 2 steps forward, you take 1 step back in terms of what you learn and gain. And ultimately, we bottle all of that into what you find here in these shapes. And the ability to swing the club faster is something that's unregulated. And so our ability to leverage more speed to the player in these designs through aerodynamics is really powerful as well.
You don't think
You're
the
working with
USPA is going to make people just go, hey, you can only swing at 110. You are not allowed to swing it any faster. We are putting a cap on how fast you're allowed to swing a club. You don't see that one coming?
No more gym time for anybody.
donuts, mandatory donuts.
Mandatory first tee donuts.
So as you mentioned, TSR one we're allowed to say is coming later, coming in the spring. So you've got 4 drivers, 3 fairway woods. Is that how we want to count it with the 4?
Or
Four?
fairway woods.
Oh, I already forgot about the one. I'm terrible. But so with all of those different sort of niches within the market to fill, was any one model in that lineup more challenging to kind of find the right formula to make it quantifiably better?
I think the 3 was definitely probably our most significant challenge. The TSI 3 has been the most dominant, probably used driver globally over the past couple of years across all of the tours. And it's just been incredible to see the adoption of that. It was very, very fast, but also had exceptional launch and spin characteristics and center gravity fitting capability, as well as our SureFit hosel system. So it was a complete package. So when JJ and Josh, our VP of marketing, came to R&D, they're like, okay, don't change this, but we want it to be faster. We want it to be longer. So when engineers get those constraints put on them, obviously that makes it more difficult and more challenging as to how we can improve and drive better performance. But we've been able to do it with TSR3. We have a new innovative face insert design called Speed Ring that allows us to really concentrate more deflection at face center, which is bringing more ball speed to players. And we've made refinements aerodynamically as well as to our SureFit CG system that are allowing the best fitters in the world like JJ to really leverage and unlock more speed and distance for players too.
Yeah, that was definitely, from a tour standpoint, we thought we came with the impossible problem. Most played driver on tour. Everybody's in love with the shape. The feel's great. It's in a sweet spot in terms of launch and spin and forgiveness, where guys are loving the performance off center. So don't change anything, just make it longer. So that was a big ask. And I think as our reps around the world have gotten TSR and our players have gotten it, it's amazing. You give it to a tour player, like, you can't make my driver better. And then you get into the nuanced areas of, wow, it is a little bit faster on center, but it's a lot faster off center as well. And the spin and launch characteristics off center are really consistent, which are really powerful for a tour player.
For me, kind of the thing with, again, the 3, as a guy who's played the 3, I played it all of, part of last season and into this season, to put the TSR 4 or 3 rather, excuse me, right behind the ball and say, my God, this looks to me like the same driver. And then to see, ballpark 2 miles an hour ball speed improvement. And it's all right, this is good. Cause I loved everything about the driver. I love the way it looks. I love the sound, the feel. I love that I hit it straight. And so to do all of that without, most of the time, sometimes things happen, but to have this thing that is incredibly familiar, just peel the plastic off and it's, like I said, it's comfortable, and just have it be a little faster. Like I see it. I think that's really cool.
That was a fun thing we experienced in the prototype testing was, we brought out TSR3, TSR2, and TSR4 to our photo shoot and commercial shoot in March, and they were in prototype stage at that point in time. But, Cam Smith, Will Zalatoris, literally they set the driver down. They go, what's different? And so everything that's different about TSR3, a lot of it's under the hood. But immediately they started playing with it and hitting it and getting fit for it. And it was night and day in terms of the performance. They both asked, can I take this week? And we're like, no, not USGA approved yet.
That leads me to another question too, which is, and kind of one for each of you, but does that fact potentially hurt you at retail in the sense that, you see a lot of things out there and seeing some sneak peeks of other metalwoods from some competitors, right, coming out next year. There's a look and feel and things that are very different. TSR, like I said, purposely doesn't look or sound or feel a whole lot different because they don't want to change those things. I guess, what is the challenge there in terms of, reps, fitting people, etc., when they might look and go, well, it doesn't look that different. It can't be that different, right? Like I can see consumers conflicted about that.
Yeah, I think the key word that you said there was fitting. If you're on a fitting tee, is the performance is going to win. And that's where we feel like Stephanie's team has given us a winning combination. So if you look down at a driver and it looks good, and then you hit it and it felt good, and then you look at the numbers and the data says, wow, that was great launch and great spin. And then you hit 10 shots and you're like, wow, those are consistent launch and spin numbers. Because we'll see, with certain competitors, highly variable numbers in that space. You'll see the 1600 to 3600 spin. When we can condense that and make consistent flight, that's going to be more performance on the golf course. So as a fitter, my goal is to help a player have a better experience on the golf course, which is normally hitting it farther straighter, scoring better. And so that's the beauty of the product, is that performance is going to be what drives it to a win. And we do things to make them look different. If you looked, when you guys saw the TSR2, pretty drastic change in shape, TSR4 changing in shape, but we had a really good model that you want to improve the areas you want to improve, but you don't want to hurt something that, if she gave me a new shape that said, this is way faster because of, sure. But if you don't do something just to do it. Josh doesn't get to make it, put a decal on it and say, hey, I just want that on the crown.
Thank goodness.
That's part of what I love about Titleist and our philosophy and the way we design and engineer products, and that it is purely about performance first and foremost. So as an engineer, that floats all of our boats because we love the fact that we get to drive the engine of this business with the product performance. And so when you ask me about what's different under the hood, well, everything's different about these drivers. Everything's better. Everything's improved. We're turning all the dials from face insert design to aerodynamics to center of gravity position to adjustability. But the fact of the matter is a lot of it's in a very classic look that I think dedicated golfers prefer. And so I think that's a really powerful position for Titleist and our metalwoods to take.
Yeah. So JJ, when you're fitting players, obviously you fit the best players in the world, and you fit people like me and Tony, who are not the best players in the world yet. How different is that when you're talking about the things like, like, hey, what Justin Thomas likes to look, sound, feel, that translates a lot. From the fitting standpoint, how different is it when you're on the tee with, Cam Smith, Will Zalatoris, JT, these guys, and then, the next week you're on the tee with Tony Covey or Chris Nickel, and you're going, oh man, this is a different animal here,
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I actually get an advantage with, take a Justin Thomas, is I've known Justin since he was 19 years old. So the list of things, I know what the look is. I know the sound we're going for. I know the types of shots. I know his spin windows and things like that. honestly, the harder part, meeting one of you on the tee for the first time is I got to ask a lot of questions really early before we even hit something, to define better. And I think that's the one thing when you're going through a fitting, make sure you define what's better. If my 7-iron goes 10 yards longer, does that make me better? Well, not if it comes out super flat and it's rolling over the back of every green. Same thing with a driver is, hey, are you looking to bring direction in? Are we looking to add distance? Do you hit more than one shot with a driver? Or you're just, hey, I need something that only does one thing. Again, Justin Thomas hits a lot of different shots with his driver versus Will Zalatoris. He hits one. He hits a cut, and that was part of the impetus of TSR 2 Plus. Now we have a really long 3-wood that draws. So he likes to have just those, where Justin hits a really high draw with his driver, kind of a stock cut, and then this really low cut as well. So we need to get him in a space so that it does all those things.
I'm guessing a little easier to fit a Tour Pro, but what could if an average golfer like me or Chris, or I would guess most of our viewers here had the opportunity to watch you fit a Tour Pro, what do you think they could take away from that?
Yeah, I think the big one is we try to focus a lot on centerness of contact. Take SureFit hosel. One of the reasons why that has stayed around, why do you have that same hosel system, is because it works. So what the loft on the driver said versus the dynamic loft you're delivering, we'll spend a lot of time for a player. I can add a 1.5 degrees to an 8 and get up to a 9.5, where I can take loft off a 10, or I can use a 9. So I have kind of 3 ways to get to a similar dynamic lofting, but I can move strike location with that and then add lie angle into that. I can change some start lines. That being open that, hey, I can't play an 8-degree driver. I always play a 9.5. I'll see players that say that a lot. I'm a 9.5. Well, we can get there a few different ways, and we can change that strike location. And that's powerful for speed and then consistency in launch and spin. So that's always a great spot to kind of start with a fit, is getting it closer to center and then working it left, right, and up, down from there.
I love that. You mentioned, we've kind of touched on where the speed comes from, so I don't think we need to delve into that too much. You mentioned the aerodynamics and the face technology, and the one thing too that you touched on was the center of gravity position.
Right.
And as we discussed when we were out with the 2 and the 3, you've shifted that center of gravity forward. And while that does tend to give golfers more fall speed, there is an MOI penalty for that. So, that's one of the things we talk about a lot, and people get excited about when they ask us, hey, what's the MOI number on this? This is with TSR. This is a case where this number is lower than it was with TSI. So, tell me why golfers shouldn't be concerned by that.
Yeah. So in engineering terms, inertia, in terms of its benefits, the player is logarithmic. And what that means is that the higher it gets, the less of a benefit that it has for the player. So there's diminishing returns to over engineering just to hit a really high MOI value. So in our strategy with Titleist Metalwoods, we're always looking at how do we balance and bring the best of all of those elements. So we knew by the repositioning of our CGs for TSR that we could make a faster driver and that we could do it without a penalty. So anytime you can make a head faster, but also keep the inertia very high, and these inertia values on the 3 and the 2 are still exceptionally high and in a very stable spot, that we're going to see benefits to that. So if you look at TSR2 as an example versus TSI2, that driver, we see for over half the players that are fit into it, and you guys, I think, experience this in your fits as well, that it's 2 miles an hour faster and 7 yards longer. So that combination just points to, and that's in a stock to stock unfit condition. So that points to the fact that just dropping 100 points of inertia, but gaining quite a bit in terms of your ball speed is a good trade-off. So inertia, when we look at design, I like to rank it probably about 4th on the list of key variables. First and most important is you want to make sure that you can hit the appropriate center of gravity position. You want to make sure that you can dial in the face insert performance accurately. You want to make sure that you're addressing aerodynamics as well. And then you want to maximize inertia as much as you can within that package. Because when you can do that, then you're able to deliver a really high performance product that's going to meet the player's needs. So that's kind of the order of operations, you could say, that we take when we look at our metal woods.
So MOI is like sunscreen. That's my analogy for the day. Because like I always thought like SPF 30 and SPF 15, I always thought 30 was twice 15. It's not. Like you go from 30 to 40 to 50, and it's, whether it's, logarithmic, is that where there's kind of this diminishing marginal utility, like each additional little bit of SPF protection isn't the numerical value. So like from 30 to 40 is not 10, it's like an extra 1% or something. And
good analogy.
Yeah. And there's
sunscreen is MOI.
go with that for now. But it's also interesting, we always want to push R&D. So we've asked for higher MOI drivers, and what they are good to show is, okay, we'll show you that and then put it on motion capture. And sometimes it's at a penalty to clubhead speed, that when you get into other thresholds, it actually slows the head down as it lines up at coming into impact. So you watch the dispersion and it's not that much tighter, but it's slower. So they do an incredible job of showing us these prototypes through the process and go, we can go there and make just the number look right, but now it's slower. Do you want one that's not that much straighter and is slower? Or do you want one that's going to feel as straight and be faster?
So the MOI, anything that's that tour players bring up with you, JJ, is it that big of a concern? Is it any kind of concern, or is it really?
Well, now that I have the SPF analogy, I have a better way to explain it. But, I think, somebody will see a post and so they have a concept. But again, luckily for a tour player is we're very performance driven. And the great part with TSR has been the face technology is helping us in retaining ball speed and retaining spin. And that's been kind of the highlight reel from a tour fitting standpoint is, a tour miss heel when they're trying to cut it, missing a couple dimples inside, is the spin isn't spiking. And the tour miss draw a couple dimples toeward, the spin's not plummeting. And so those are really powerful shots on the fitting tee for a player to go, I know I'm going to hit that shot in competition. And that spin consistency and the ball speed consistency is going to put me in a better spot. And I know that's going to translate to me having a better club into a hole, and is going to translate into a lower score.
So with all those things being said, right, and performance driven, and, we'll see it, different testing, different things. Obviously, you guys have a tremendous amount of internal data around it. Yet still, we see some players that don't want to switch, right? Like I think of a Patrick Cantlay or somebody who is, and I forgive like the irons and some wedges and things where, if you're really, like you said, dialed into those spin and launch windows, the next product out may not necessarily be better from a performance standpoint. But like in my head, I'm trying to think of a reason a tour player wouldn't want a little bit more speed and, like you said, more ball speed and the correct type of spin retention on off center hits. Like when you have a situation like that where a guy maybe isn't changing as quickly as everybody, I'm sure, inside would like them to, how do you address that? And maybe ultimately, what keeps some guys or gals from going with a product that, is by all accounts universally better than what it's replacing?
Yeah, I mean, familiarity is part of it. When we say a better shape, we're trying to make a better shape for as many players as we can. So when we change those shapes or change that sound, there's other players that prefer those other ones. When you look at the players that would still be in kind of a 680 shape, there's very few that like a really big blade, a lot of offset, but there are a few of those around still versus kind of a cleaner, less offset like a T100 or a 620 MB. So there is going to be those crossovers where, that shape or that sound might not be in that sweet spot, and a player is willing to say, okay, I'm okay with leaving that ball speed because over the ball and the shot I want to hit, I want a certain shape and I want a certain feedback on it. So we'll always be available. We track stats for for all of our players, and are ready with that information when they're ready to make that change.
So we hear sometimes when new drivers come out, and you guys now have probably got hundreds of TSR fittings in the book, but we sometimes hear about like these magical pairings of shaft and head where things just come together. And I know you guys put a lot of effort into your stock shafts and try not to water that down, but are you hearing of any sort of like magical TSR plus whatever shaft combinations? I guess what I'm driving at is, do we all need to be in an autoflex?
Give me the autoflex. I need the autoflex.
Within our lineup, you've mentioned this, Tony. We have some great featured shaft options. From lightweight, high launch, counterbalance, all the way to kind of a lower launch, heavier weight. So we run the gamut, as well as offering multiple brands that are really premium level quality brands. And then we also have a premium shaft line too that we partner with Graphite Design on. So there's lots of options. I don't know. Have you seen any trends on tour in terms of where players are gravitating with TSR and shaft?
Yeah, in our early ones, 95% of our players on tour stayed in the same shaft they were in. We actually got 1K Black, which is a new featured shaft. That's the stiffest tip section shaft we've had in a featured shaft, I think, ever. That we're finally getting a little feedback from players, and it's kind of got really nice feel, and it's throwing some knuckles out there where actually a couple players have hit it. We've had to kind of go a click up in loft, which is creating some cool environment. So that's one I think we can start to see a little noise on coming up, because it's kind of just new in the Mitsubishi lineup. So we're intrigued on getting a little bit more testing in the fall, but the head's been so good in performance that, again, 95% of our folks have stayed in the same setup.
That's kind of what I did. I just popped the head off my driver, stuck on a TSR3, hit it a few times. I'm like, I think we're good.
Yep.
All right.
I'm good. Let's go.
Did you guys hit autoflex when you came out?
I didn't this time. I did last time out.
We did. I think last time, Tony, we both hit the one that had been built up for Danielle King. And I would just say that autoflex did not agree with my tempo.
It was for me, it was kind of fascinating because I could feel it. Like, it's just so light, and I was moving. I was on the TrackMan. I'm hitting like 112, 113 head speed, and it's like this towering trajectory. And then we look at it, and Nick, the fitter I was working with, was like, yeah, it's 10 yards shorter than your Ventus. It's maybe not.
It was spinning like 4,500. We talk a lot about drivers, right? The focus. We know a lot of the clubs like draft off the driver, so to speak, right? But Tony always writes the driver articles. I always write the fairway wood and hybrid articles, and like
tens of people read them.
And tens of 20 and 12 and 13 people read my articles. Why should people get excited about the fairway woods and like I said, line extension stuff coming in September? But right now we're going to focus on the fairway woods. JJ, help me out. Why should somebody read my article on the fairway woods?
So ask any fitter, what is the hardest club to fit? They're all going to tell you 3-wood. And it'll be resounding. It'll be the one survey you guys do for fitters. 3-wood is the hardest club to fit because it's got to do a lot, and players aren't always the best at hitting that club. You know, it's the lower loft off the ground. And so we get in this kind of unique space from a tour player. Hey, I like older 3-woods because once I find one, I never want to leave it. And then from a retail standpoint of, it's a really hard club. So when we talked to Stephanie and Tom Bennett about this, it was, well, what if we just focus on flight first here? Let's make something easy to get launch, and then we'll start working backwards from that. And it was one of the first launches where, like, the rumblings on the range were about fairway woods, where, yeah, my driver's a little farther, but have you guys tried the 3-woods? Where you just hear the players chatting amongst each other? You don't ever hear that at a launch. And so it's been really cool to have the line extension of the 2+, but hear players literally asking for 3-woods, where normally they're like, I'll get to 3-wood in a couple weeks.
Maybe next year.
I mean,
Yeah, I'll bookmark the article, come back 6 months later, and then I won't read it. That's how they treat them on. So
the testament to that, though, real quick, it was just at the Corn Ferry launch that we actually, week 1 had 34 fairway woods in play for TSR and 31 TSR drivers, which is the most we've ever had at a launch of a product on a tour ever. But the fact that the fairway woods were even more than the drivers just kind of spoke to how redefined they are in terms of the.
Do you know what that number is typically? Like how
on a
few
week,
fairway would go on quickly?
Would be 8. So I mean, it was a good 4 times larger than a typical adoption on fairways week 1.
And that was that sort of across the lineup, or was that a lot of the 2+?
I don't.
In terms of the breakdown,
I don't think they had a 2+ in play. That was all 2s and 3s.
yes.
Okay.
really, so the 2+, that's the one I fit into. Historically, that had been a club that you did not, but
No.
historically, that's been a club, right, that Titleist did not have in a fairway wood. What made you guys decide to create that? Because, I'll go back to like Cobra's LTD and some of these slightly bigger fairway woods, the idea of getting, the CG kind of right on or close to that neutral axis, high launch, low spin, maybe a little bit bigger head, maybe pushing that 190, 195 cc type of volume. A lot of people don't fit into that or don't like it. What made you guys decide this time around to come out with that specifically? And secondarily, thank you, because now I have a fairway one.
Well, we're always looking at where are voids in our product line. And part of the collaboration that JJ and our team have is that we sit down every week and he'll come back to us and say, I'm seeing this trend on the tour that, there's more and more stronger, younger, better players. You could just say they're faster. And they're no longer really using 3 woods to hit into par 5s from fairways. A lot of them are using 3 woods purely as tee specific golf clubs. And for the longest time, he said, we don't need a fairway wood that goes further. But he came back to us and he said, I love one that could go further off the tee. And so, as JJ mentioned, Tom Bennett, who leads our fairway wood designs on our metalwood team, he went to the task of how do I make a product that's really going to perform from the tee, but also be able to drive great performance still from the turf condition. And that's the 2+. So it's our deepest, lowest center of gravity that we've had. It's also our highest inertia, largest head volume in a 3 wood. We're making it in a 13 degree. And I think the most surprising thing has been probably just what players experience when they see it. I don't want people to get turned off when they see 13 degrees because JJ will kind of give the anecdotal story, but it launches in a completely different window than you would expect.
Yeah, I mean, that was the biggest debate around the 2+ internally was, should we not put loft on it? Because it tends to launch so high. I mean, the tour story of it is Will Zalatoris at the Scottish Open. He's like, there's this course I play in April that has a lot of tee shots that call for draws. I tut it. Can we start working on a 3 wood for those holes? And so showed him 2+. He's like, he's coming from a 16.5 TSI 3. So show him this. He's like, I'll roll that. I need something that's high and drawing. And so I built him one in a D4 setting, a little extra loft, and his eyes were lost on the first shot. He looked here, the ball's up there. He's like, what is this? And his caddy looks at him. He's like, know where this also would look really good? St. Andrews. So it went in the bag and he hasn't moved it out yet. So it's just a really cool product because it's fast. It's got a really good confidence inspiring look. And if that center of gravity fits you, it performs really well.
It's got what is a fairly complete lineup, I would say, with TSR4. But now I'm gonna state something very obvious. Steph, you are a woman, and you are not just that, but you are a woman who heads up metalwood development for one of the biggest golf companies in the world. And I see what your competitors are doing in the space. There's a big push now, I would say, industry wide. So why at this point in time does Titleist not offer, and I will use the requisite air quote here, women's golf clubs?
Well, we do offer women's specifications to our golf clubs. And so TSR 1, which is coming in the spring, our TSI 1 in the past, we've continued to expand and build out that lineup. So looking at higher lofts, looking at what the more moderate and slower swing speed players require. And generally speaking, some of the lady players fall into that category. So having lightweight shaft options, having lighter head weights, overall build weights coming down, helping them to generate clubhead speed and ball speed through that configuration. Also really being able to drive the appropriate launch and spin. So our 1 category is more of a mid-spin product that helps them to keep the ball in the air and maximize their carry distance as well as their roll. And then you look at what we've done with adding our fairways hybrids to those lines as well. So extending and offering higher lofted fairway woods all the way down to a 9 wood, which is a 23-degree product. And then also in our hybrids going up to a 6-iron replacement. So those elements and the fact that we do offer those products, it's not packaged in what you might call a women's set or a ladies set, but absolutely we have the products to help fit women golfers to play their best golf.
Yeah, and my stat I'd throw in there would be Titleist drivers were tied for the most played drivers at the Women's U.S. Amateur. So we have product that if you get fit, you can play at a really high level regardless.
Have you done any testing in R&D to see if pink paint improves performance in clubs for women?
No shrink it and pink it here at Titleist, right?
I think it's such a fascinating area though. Like, I have 7 daughters, right? And it's a conundrum all its own. And they're all very different in their own regards. And some of them have taken to golf, some of them haven't. Half of them are athletes, the other half are not athletes. But when they look at different things, some of them like something that's identifiably feminine a little bit, like a little bit of color or something like that. But a lot of them don't. They're like, I don't want it to look overly girly, or I don't want to bedazzle this, that, or whatever. That doesn't resonate for them. What do you guys see like in the golf space with women golfers? Is your sense that they don't want? I mean, that it's a tough area, right? How much do you cater with certain things without, while staying true to kind of your brand ethos, and what does that look like? What are you guys seeing kind of in that regard?
I would say that we know that there are female golfers that prefer kind of being able to have the stylistic choices. But our brand identity, first and foremost, and what we're trying to help deliver to golfers, all golfers, is better performance. And so if a female golfer or a male golfer is looking for, products that are going to help them to play their best golf, Titleist is a brand they should seriously consider and look at. So we feel confident with our positioning in that regard, and really hope that, more players will consider our products as well.
Yeah, and with, in my space there is working with LPGA players, Danielle Kang and Jess and Nelly Korda. If I was getting that feedback from those players, I'd be bringing it to Stephanie. But when they are seeing TSR and going, wow, that looks great, I'm feeling pretty good about the space we're in. And then when they get the performance on a launch monitor and then on course, we feel like we're in a pretty good position.
Ultimately, your golf club doesn't know your gender. And so we try to make golf clubs that can fit everyone.
Yeah, that's well said. That's well said, I think. Tony, I have a follow-up question, but I want to know if you have any questions.
Ask your follow. I got one more I want to get to it.
All right. Well, and you don't have to ask this right now, but I want to know what questions you guys have for me and Tony. We don't. I would like throw it.
We're going to bring in AskMyGolfSpy.
AskMyGolfSpy. Yeah. What's a question? The people out there want to know something. You've got to have these internal questions like, oh, I need to ask Tony blank. What do you want to ask him or me?
You want to open?
You go first.
What is your all-time favorite driver, Tony? All-time favorite. You can never switch.
Yeah.
You got to play one forever.
Well, I mean, there is a part of me that absolutely loves TSI 3, but I mean, I think in terms of like a bit of magic that I experienced, I would say probably the G400 LST. And I hate saying that to the Titleist guys, but like if I go back and go, yeah, this one just,
What shaft did you have in there?
that's a good, I think it was the Ping Tour shaft, actually. Ping's stock Tour shaft.
UST Mamiya probably made that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, it's a good shaft.
Yeah, sometimes it's the good old, Pro Force Gold, remember back in the day when you had that, or an EI-70 and something.
The Grapholi ProLite 35 and 983 combo was one of my all-time favorites. Probably right neck to neck with the 510 TP when they first came out, and they actually had a Speeder 757 as the stock shaft. That was a hallmark moment, I think.
Super Quad is one that I still have a little bit of affinity for.
No.
It was like
spinny.
And
It was
like,
spinny and short and awful.
Yeah, I know. It was like, in hindsight, there was a lot wrong with it, but I mean, it looked good.
Might as well play a bomb tech at that point, Tony.
Oh, full of pin.
Well, JJ didn't say you live in this perfect euphoria, right? The driver is always going to be the best performing driver in your mind.
That's right.
Right.
And I'm in a unique space too. Like now I'm like, all right, I have the opportunity to get fit for stuff. And so that's, the stuff that I get fit into and fit in really well, that tends to be my favorite.
I guess for my question, for the MyGolfSpy audience, what do you think drives them to consider a new driver, to go out and say, I'm going to go and buy this new driver? What influences their decisions?
Whatever Tony's playing.
I think it's really, I hate to admit it, but we all you just want to find this little bit of magic, right? There's the idea that there's always more distance to be gained. And so I think it's always distance. And then on top of that, I think it's in all of us who play this game, like every now and again, we just want new stuff because new stuff is cool. And so there is a timing element. If you can deliver something that's really cool. And I think this is what Chris was touching on when he talked about the fact that TSR 3 in particular, like it just looks the same. And so like that, how do you make something that's the same seem really cool as a challenge? But yeah, there is a cool factor that's always in play. So that's why, the red carbon face is such an awesome story, because it just pops. And so you want to go try that. So I think sort of that just initial excitement, probably when people see something cool, drives them.
I'd encourage all of those red carbon face users to go and test TSR. I feel pretty confident.
But Steph, it's a great question, because, we know that core golfer, right? That, they account for roughly 50% of all the spending in the golf industry. And, that percentage, that group, is going to disproportionately buy more product than any other group out there. And what gets them excited, I think it is still first and foremost distance. I think because distance represents this optimism and hope that we all have, that as we get older, we're not going to hit it shorter. We may hit it longer. We may do all of these things, right? And distance is that hope, right? For the average golfer, when you bomb one off the tee and you're walking down the fairway or whatever, and there's two balls, and your buddy, they walk to the wrong ball because it's the one that's further down, and you just kind of keep walking by their ball and walk down. You're like, oh, I think you're back there, right? That never gets old, never. And yes, from a scoring standpoint, the best players at my course are the best ball strikers. I love watching wedges, but that is the difference. I get that doesn't necessarily sell or resonate in the marketplace the same way that distance does. So I think that distance does, if people to rank what they want out of a new driver, I think it would be distance number one, and then some of those other factors. Yeah, distance. looks, feel, sound, playability, whatever the case is. And I think that's where the real challenge lies. Tony and I talked about this on the last podcast, was what are the real big areas for improvement? And Tony's like, spec tolerance. Yay. We can make stuff more on spec. And consumers are like, I don't care. Like, that doesn't resonate, right? I want high caffeine. I want big power. I want to try to do some of those things. I want to find another mile or 2 an hour ball speed. So I think and I don't know that changes anytime soon. I think that's what they want.
And that's my last question is, as we talked about on last week's episode, where is the meat left on the bone for each club category? So within the driver space, first, how much meat is really left in terms of speed? How much faster can you go and still stay within the USGA regulations? And the second piece is, where else is there real opportunity for improvement?
I think, we're still driving towards unlocking. Is there more opportunities to help golfers swing the club faster, right? Exotic materials, we have a material scientist who's PhD, and he looks at anytime new materials are unclassified from the government, from the military, we're looking, hey, are there applications that would allow us to make a better golf club, make a better driver, make a better fairway wood with that? So that's the fun for us, is that, we continue to look at this box. You could say that there's a box with regards to club equipment that we can design within. And it's, how do you push into those corners? How do you reach for that next little bit and bring even better performance to the player? And so with regards to, are we there yet? No, we're not there yet. I know that there's still some things that we can do. And we're going to continue to search and study it to make sure we can bring it to the golfer.
Yeah, I'm always amazed what Stephanie and her team can do. I think they do such a good job of there isn't, I think what the consumer sometimes thinks is that there's a big lock that hasn't been unlocked, where Stephanie's team finds, my favorite story was TS, when she had 20 slides and Josh Talge's there adding things up, and he raises his hand at the end. He's like, does that equal this? Is she's not trying to do it in one big, wow, we did one thing and that got somebody all this yardage. It's a combination. So keep pushing towards all the corners, that it keeps adding up to performance. And that's really where it's going to just keep going, is finding these incremental and then adding those incrementals back in.
Which makes it harder for, consumers maybe to get as excited, right? Sometimes, because all those incremental things, it's a bigger story, right, to have to tell. But that's really what we do with Titleist Metalwoods, is we push on all of those things to try to bring the best possible performance in drivers and fairways and hybrids to players.
Yeah, golfers are like weight loss people, right? Where they want that one magic solution. Oh, there's 20 pounds. But the reality is, the best way to do it is little things here, little things there, I'm speaking from experience. And, trying to find those little kind of iterative, right, steps. And all of a sudden, 20 times 0.2 is, maybe better, right, than, 1 times 1 or 1.5 times 1, because you've taken all these little incremental gains. So, Tony, any final thought?
Well, what we need is like a weight on the sole or some type of dial, and you just turn it for how many more yards you want. So if you build that in, turn it up to 11, maybe that's as high as it goes. I don't know.
Just let your fitter turn a bunch of dials for you and find out what that distance equals.
Yep. So excited to see where this goes. Thank you guys for spending some time with us. Find us on the interwebs. We have GolfSpy C, GolfSpy T. Ask us some questions. JJ's
on Twitter too, but he never does anything.
That's also fair. Also fair. But tag us, find us, ask us questions. What do you want to know? What didn't we cover? We'll get you answers. Thank you guys for hopping on. Have an awesome weekend. And until next time, Tony,
kudos to you and your entire team, Stephanie. I think we'd be remiss not to say that, right?
Yes, great.
We out.